Good evening, councillors, and a warm welcome to Rushcliffe Borough Council's Community Scrutiny Group meeting here on 23rd January 2025. I'd like to remind everyone that the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. A recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the council's YouTube channel. In addition, under the local authorities regulations 2012, other people may film, record, post on social media or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the council's control. Just as a mayor, we remind councillors to please switch off your microphones when you're not speaking because of the cameras in the system. And just to let everybody know, tonight with the officers' report, we've got Darryl Birch here, Service Manager Neighbourhoods, and Ed Palmer, Communication and Customer Service Manager. So going on to the first item of the agenda is apologies for absence, and I don't think we have any.
We have no apologies for absence.
No. Thank you very much. Item 2, declarations of interest. Do we have any at all? No, none. Righto. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of July 2024. So if there's anyone can remember that far back and got any comments on the minutes? Righto. Could I have a show of hands to accept those and for me to sign? Thank you very much. And then item 4 is the minutes of the joint scrutiny group held on the 17th of October 2024. Any questions on those minutes at all? And it's just for the approval of those minutes from our group, and then they will go to growth as well when they next meet for their approval, just to let every councillors know. So I can have a show of hands, please. Thank you very much. Right, on to item 5, residents survey. I'll pass over to Ed.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. We've got a very short presentation just to start with this evening. I don't intend to go over everything in terms of the context that's already in front of you, but these are just a few additional points to give it a bit of extra context and a couple of points I wanted to make. So just going off to the first slide, if that's okay, Emma. So as you can see from the report, we had 1,338 residents complete the survey on this occasion, an increase of roughly 200 compared with 3 years ago, the last time it was created. The difference with this was what we found worked well was a Facebook boosted campaign. Facebook is by far and away our biggest social media outlet and reaches big audiences, together with that matched with the survey going into the middle of the summer edition of Rushcliffe Reports. So it was favourable that we got a better response, but I think as the report says, this relates only to about 1 to 2% of the local population who access council services. So that's probably an important context for this evening. It's only really one barometer and a relatively small pool. We know that our fellow local authorities also have similar sorts of feedback to surveys in this manner. So it's always something that we're looking to improve. The results are in places, I emphasise in places, very much similar to 2021. It's a positive look on one hand because it's the context of that lack of confidence in public services decreased, lots and lots of factors around this as to why public services are perceived in certain ways, and of course, rightly so, expectations amongst our residents and other stakeholders continue to rise. There's a lot of information, ever more so in the digital age, that can influence as to why people have a perception. But that aside as well, it can also just be because of their direct result of how they feel their experience has been when they've encountered one of our services. So a lot of thoughts and influences to go into the melting pot about why they might respond to a survey in a certain way. I'll go in a little bit later to then the free text box comments as well were another indicator of this that's mentioned in the report, and how much they concentrated on, in a lot of cases, services that, of course, the Borough Council doesn't deal with, namely highways, of course. But there was lots, of course, we do deal with around curbside glass, growth, planning, weeds and verges, a little bit of overlap there with what County Council again do, recycling centres and services perceived as West Bridgford centric. We'll go on to that in a little bit. These are the headline results then that go back as well to some of the indicators on our corporate scorecard. Again, there's consistency there with 2021. Some favourable increases, although again marginal, and again some of those that have decreased are in most cases marginal. The only one there that I'd like to point out is, of course, percentage of people satisfied with the variety of ways they can contact the council. 6% drop is not something that we are looking to see, but it's something that I'm looking to try and address tonight with some of the proposed actions. Whilst it's not a huge drop, it's still something that we again want to see increasing, not decreasing. But all of these, obviously, the statistics are already in the report, and I'm sure we can go over any aspects that you want to look into this evening. Just to put it in context as well, then the national picture is always one that we're really mindful of. It's again not the only barometer, but it is an interesting one to look at where when the Local Government Association do their spread of surveys across the country, where do we compare? And interestingly there, obviously, we've got better figures in many areas in green, but some, of course, again, where we've got items to really look at. Some of them are relatively marginal drops, but certainly it's interesting to look at the influence as to why, for example, residents think slightly less of, we act on the concerns of local residents. Why is that? What do we need to try and do to address that? Equally even down to satisfaction with parks and open space cleanliness. Now, this was not something that came through in the free text box comments. There was not lots of comments to say people were dissatisfied, and yet we've got a score there of 5% lower than what could be one barometer of a national average. So again, we're looking at ways in which, why is that people feel that's the connection. The real key here is to say, very much as we done with the survey 3 years ago and the previous one in 2018, there is inconsistencies like that appear. You would have thought that we would have heard more about dissatisfaction with parks and open space cleanliness as to why we've got a lower mark than we had 3 years ago, and yet that didn't come through. So I think that's probably a key point again for tonight, is that you do get a trend of inconsistencies, and some of the scores may not actually reflect what things are like on the ground. It is a perception. So just those open text box comments, of the 13,338 respondents, they kindly took the time to leave comments on 126 themes. And as we can see there, the vast majority, the most was then on highways. Despite obviously ongoing efforts between all authorities, we try and educate and inform about which council does what, but with respect as well, we also understand people have very busy lives. Residents, they just want their answers, queries answering about particular topics, and we would understand why, if they've got a particular issue with a highway, they still want to use the survey for the Borough Council to voice their displeasure. So I'm hasten to add that in some of these cases, it's not all negative. There was obviously, you can see there 20 compliments as well amongst it, but of course people understandably want a high level of service. They've got high expectations, and rightly so. And this is where the majority of obviously the feedback were under these themes here. So there's lots of, obviously, as you can imagine, lots and lots of topics for 126 themes to be included. That shows you the scale in which the volume of topics that people want to leave their views on. And just going into then what we're looking to do around some of the actions tonight. So what we're going to be feeding into and shaping from the actions is towards our new communications and engagement strategy. The peer review outlined in their recommendations last year around looking at a lot more further engagement. There's reasons why we haven't done as much to date. For example, we haven't actually got a dedicated engagement team at the council. That ended in around about 2010. But that's not to say that we don't engage. It's just the manner in which we do it, I think, is maybe more in focus tonight. So what we're going to be doing is making that, it's currently a comms strategy, communication strategy, but it will be communications engagement from what we do in the spring onwards. And what we'll focus in a little bit more on here is, as the peer challenge outlined, we do involve, consult and inform our residents, but what we do less of at the top there is collaborate and devolve. And that's another maybe strand to look at this evening, as to how do we work with other organisations to look at trying to get that information out to people, but also to listen vitally and to engage. And just the other thing to work out is that we'll try and look at some of the actions around how will we actually implement that collaboration, development, as well as anything else we want to do with existing resources. We're not anticipating that we are, for example, able to create a new engagement team as a result of what we've got on the slate at the moment. But hey, this is for discussion this evening, and that if we feel that there's scope for that, what does that look like? And just very finally, I just wanted to say before we go into the discussion, it's not as if as I said, we don't engage on a daily basis already through the variety of ways, not just on social media. We've got our, obviously, email channels, our customer service phone channels that we are listening to feedback each day. And these do already shape services. So it's a case of not saying that we don't take that engagement, we don't take the feedback straight away and change things, because every day services are tweaked accordingly in line with trends that residents feedback to us, even down to events itself. It's something that possibly we can explore about tonight. Is there other ways in which we can get further feedback? But we take obviously anecdotal evidence from events. When Proms in the Park is run, Lark in the Park is run, every year we look and feedback and listen to what people tell us on the ground, and also, for example, on social media otherwise afterwards, and it all goes into the melting pot of trying to shape them. So these are the proposed actions for that are in the report this evening. I won't go through them each one, but there's just obviously in some cases just a shortened version of each. I don't know where you'd like to start the discussion, Chair.
Right, just to remind all councillors of the recommendations tonight is to discuss the results and identify any further actions that should be taken as a result of the survey findings, and to agree for the council to include relevant follow-up actions in its communications and engagement and customer access strategies 2025-2028 relating to the ways in which residents can contact and engage in feedback on services. So it's just to remind that's kind of what we're just being asked to consider for tonight. And as we've got the kind of proposed actions on the screen for us to say, I'll open it up to the floor for comments and questions from councillors. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. I've been on a number of different councils, and the feedback to these kind of questionnaires is always pretty pathetic in terms of percentages, to the extent that you have to ask the question, A, is the evidence hard enough given the low numbers? And B, is it even worth doing? Now, I'm not suggesting that it's not worth doing, but unless we can increase the percentage feedback, I don't think it really serves any purpose. That's my first point. My second point is, every councillor knows that the general public have not too much of an idea as to which council is responsible for what. And the highways is a prime example. So I wonder if to try to eliminate that aspect of the survey, there could be a little bit of a preamble which actually makes it clear that Rushcliffe Borough Council has no highways responsibility whatsoever. I don't think that people would be interested in a big spiel about what we're responsible for and what we're not responsible for, but the highways is such a big exception that I think we need to eliminate that element if we can. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, just in response to that, we did put a blurb at the start of the 2018 and 21 surveys, for example, that highlighted, for example, these are the services that we don't run. It still didn't stop a similar response. And again, I think that's understandable, because I think residents want to use it as this is my opportunity to voice what I think is a concern. And the other services, you may not run them, but they're of a concern to me. So we took that on board. We took it out of this one in partly because of print purposes as well. We wanted to get the new questions in. And so, of course, to do it in a concise manner and not make it too lengthy. And because we'd had that feedback before, that's why it didn't appear this time.
Just to follow up on what Councillor Ellis said about the breadth of responses we're getting, and ask a question. I know you are suggesting we should have a tick box, if you like, for demographic. You know, where we go. Have we got any information of where in the borough these responses are coming from? Because if they're in the wider borough outside West Bridgford, I'll probably suggest that a lot of the negativity is because a lot of the information that comes out is West Bridgford focused, because it's the natural place to do things. I get that, because you've got a bigger percentage of population there, but the people in the wider borough grumble a lot about it.
No, certainly that's come through in loud and clear in terms of a survey this nature. We deliberately, again, I'm only learning on pre the time I've been in this role. I think previous surveys did ask for a postcode, and even that was enough of a barrier to say, okay, again, personal information being given, as much as we couldn't direct it and link it to an individual, of course, a postcode, for example, it was still a barrier enough to not fill it in. The anonymity was part of the strength of this. However, it's come full circle. We want to see the demographics now, and I think what we're looking to do with more regular consultation on certain topics and certain services is we would start to try and tap into, say, would you mind giving us your details in terms of your demographic, to try and learn more about who is responding and why. Yeah.
Well, just rather than doing a postcode, if you just say what town or village, what area do you live in, if it's, and groups, say 3 villages together, so people aren't being very specific about it.
I haven't got any statistics to back it up, but it apparently was a barrier for a couple of surveys that there was a lesser response, and it was linked to, is it a case that it doesn't feel as if this is as anonymous as it might be, but I'm not sure if that was genuinely the case. So we'll maybe look to explore it. If we do any new consultation of any description, we can put that in as a trial initially and see what sort of response we get, or if we get any response to say, I'd rather not leave my any personal details.
Councillor Pratt.
In terms of this survey, which stakeholders or organizations did we collaborate with? Like, did we collaborate with parish councils, Rushcliffe Business Network, or our local businesses, etc., to share this survey to their service users or the people who are engaging with that network? And if we did, have we had any response from them? Do we have any data who's engaged with the council to share this survey to wider residents?
This, I think, is where we're at a bit of a crossroads with where we go from here with this survey. It was done for benchmarking purposes, very much like the previous surveys have done, so you've got that comparison. It was sent out to all range of local town and parish councils, would have been sent to the county council to share. It will have gone to our network of business contacts, but we haven't got the data back as to what that subsequently led to responses. So we haven't got any data, and this is what I think the point is. We're looking now to try and get a lot more information about the demographic of who is responding, so we can look at that further and help it shape the services. But yeah, it's a really key point that we haven't got that insight as to who has responded and how. And I think, again, it's because of historical reasons as to why we wanted to keep it anonymous.
Councillor Mallender.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was reflecting on the demographic side of it and how difficult it is to get information out of people with things like that. One of the things that did occur to me was, just looking at the social media, you say Facebook is the one that's getting, the biggest traffic out there. But of course, different social media do appeal very widely to different age groups, different demographics. So Facebook is older people like myself keeping in touch with the schoolmates, and then you've got Instagram, you've got X, you've got Blue Sky, which is starting to replace X quite noticeably among certain segments of society as well. You've got Snapchat, you've got TikTok. I mean, the more of these we can use, I know it's an added burden to try and get the things working together and just must go on all of them, but if we could sort of hit a wider range of social media to give us that wider demographic, that might be one way of getting that sort of information back.
It will be, again, as it was 3 years ago, in the communications and engagement strategy to explore social media channels. Absolutely. One of the reasons that we've got from the data that we have got from what we've done so far is that one of our key demographic in terms of response and engagement with social media posts tends to be females aged 30 to 65. And we know that the key demographic is on Facebook with what we've got now. If we had other channels that were built and established, that might not be the case. But that's one of the reasons that to date we haven't created extra accounts in terms of anything about TikTok, Blue Sky, just at the moment, because we know we can hit, I wouldn't say a majority of social media users on Facebook, but we know it has an impact that permeates through. So it's getting that balance right. We know social media channels, as you say, they go up and down, and they're ever evolving. So I think it's something that we'll look at in deeper focus this time around, because we know we can't rest on our laurels, but we know that the engagement that we've had from Facebook has far outweighed any of the other channels, and therefore that's why we've invested something like this. When we come to a survey, we want to try and hit that bigger mass number to try and get as many responses and insight as possible.
Just to follow up on the other one, you're thinking about the rural versus, you know, West Bridgeford thing or villages. I mean, if people won't put the postcodes in, is it worth having a sort of a button early on that says something like West Bridgeford or larger village, e.g. Bingham, Ruddington, or smaller village, rural, just so people have like 3 options maybe that just is really clear, but doesn't tell you exactly where people are, but does give us that broad brush of where the responses are coming from.
I think we'll certainly look at and get external advice as well about consultation in this way, in terms of what are the trends likely to be for a borough such as our own, with that demographic that we've got between urban and rural. What's the best option around this? So I think we'll seek some external advice on that when we start to look at the additional engagement we do.
Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. We know you've got Facebook, Instagram, we've just been speaking about. Is it still done in like an old-fashioned way where you're on the streets as well? I know there's a lot of questions and you can't ask 226 questions, but bring it to their attention, you know, that they could get an old-fashioned paper copy or something like that.
The survey was in the summer edition then of Rushcliffe Reports, so that's the way through, most directly through the letterbox. We haven't got the resource, maybe in previous times, when the engagement side, the engagement posts existed here, that might have been done, because I know historically that would have been a very important part of how to gain feedback. But no, there's nothing in terms of additional in-person consultation. It's something where, even with what we've got to look at this evening, I think we put with the resources we've got with respect, we may not be able to put that into a budget to gain that. That said, there's many people out there who are not digitally engaged, and if for whatever reason they do not respond to the Rushcliffe Reports that lands through the letterbox, we do need to look at other ways in which to try and capture information. So it's certainly something to consider, but at the moment it hasn't been done for a number of years. I think because there's a greater way to capture the same information through a digital means, but it's something to consider.
Yeah, just following up on that. There is, as we know, there's a large population that wouldn't use any of these. You know what I mean? That's what I'm trying to get at. Thank you.
I think if I'm right as well, we're really aware of that. I think Rushcliffe still has the most elderly demographic of any borough or district in the county. So yeah, we're ever more looking at, I think we've put there, engage with hard to reach groups, and that's absolutely the way in which we're looking to try and do this. We're aware digital is not the answer to everything. So I think it's, even if you look at ways in which, I know one of the ways we're looking at to get maybe more regular feedback is on events. We could easily set up a survey online, not just ask on the social media channels, but ask our other stakeholders, the local press, contacts to say, can you run this feature for us? We want event goers to give us our feedback on if they've been to an event, but do we then back that up with other ways in which to try and reach people in person? The difficulty is that resource only stretches so far. So we can't guarantee that if we hold an event, for example, in Bridgeford Park, that if we won't go to a concert on a Saturday evening, say, if we go on Monday morning, what percentage of those people actually went to the event? It's impossible to say. So I think this is probably where we try and use our resources as much as possible to go, we're going to go to the people direct who actually we know have been to the event, and to reach them, the easiest way is to do that digitally. So it's a difficult one. I can't give a hard and fast answer to say what is the magic result of trying to reach people who are not digitally engaged. So we have indeed. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, again, that is food for thought. Is it something that we need to have a look at the actions tonight to say do we need to review that in-person consultation then? And in terms of how is that resourced? So maybe that's something to look at here.
Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if a way of reaching more people would be to actually conduct the survey when the council tax bills go out to everybody, because then you've grabbed people's attention. The downside is
That'll ruin our stats.
absolutely, absolutely, but you'll grab people's attention. I also sort of agree with we need to know the demographic. Where are those people sort of responding from? And I suspect a lot of them might be from the estates where the management companies are, because they've got a lot of gripes in those areas. And maybe the parks, the reason why the percentages are down there is that those parks are managed by the management companies, and they potentially won't be doing as good a job as our own people. So I just wonder if they're sort of things to consider. Thank you.
Absolutely, both. I mean, like I say, I think there's other ways in which we've got databases we can reach people direct. We could certainly consider looking at what we've got permissions for. So when we contact somebody for council tax, what is reasonable for them to receive as well with a council tax bill. We could certainly look at that, ways in which we contact people, and how when is the best time to connect with them. The other part, I completely take on board about education about who runs what, and therefore, if you take the parks example, it might not be it's a Rushcliffe Borough Council park that they have issue with, it could be another. So this is something else around potential further engagement, is that we can send out, it could be twice yearly, it could be once a year, more specific questions around a particular service or topic, and then try and get as much information in around that and compare it time on time, and see if there is that insight between it knowing it's an RBC park we're looking at here, or if it's managed or owned by somebody else. Yeah.
So I think what we're saying is a specific question for those residents who are on a managed estate, and then we can sort of monitor what's coming back, because I think we need to have a sort of bigger picture on what the issues are out there. Thank you.
Yeah, just looking at the question there, it's a really good point you raised, because the actual question raises percentage of people who are satisfied with parks and open space cleanliness. So there could be a slight discrepancy there on what we're getting fed back. So thank you for that.
Just from my point of view, with some of the stuff that you touched on there about the surveys and like targeting the surveys and all that kind of thing, I think it's a good idea on some of the specific areas, because again, when you get a survey like this, it can be quite daunting to see how many questions there is, and they're going, oh, I've got to fill in all of this. So if it could be kind of broken down and targeted at specific times of the year, and look at focusing on a service area of the council as well. I couldn't see in the actual report, when was the survey done? Because again, the timing of surveys can also give perception, like if you're doing it very much in January, then everybody's just had Christmas we've only just had like Blue Monday and all that kind of thing, so people are kind of looking a bit. Whereas if you do it in the summer, it's bright outside, it's sunny, everybody's like joyful that they've got holidays, all that kind of stuff. That can change people's perception and change these survey figures, which I'm sure that they're kind of done at the same time of the year with previously. But again, has that looked at different kind of aspects of when they're done and just to compare and have like a smaller survey just to, as an ongoing thing, but at different times of the year, and just kind of the point where councillors have been saying around trying to just get a demographic of where people are coming from. I know we're kind of going very specific locations, but couldn't we just put a simple question of do they feel that they're in a rural or an urban area at least, that it's rather than trying to break it down onto specific postcode or town or village as well, just to get something that gives us an idea of where their train of thought or feelings could come from where they are. Because again, somebody's view in West Bridgford and in Bingham could be very different to like East Leek and a village out like at Hickling, for instance.
No, absolutely. And I think hopefully the actions here highlight that we are going to look to increase consultation more specifically on topics and services. So yeah, that's definitely where we can come forward. And I think maybe that we can draw up a list of what we will look to focus on. But the open text box comments are a starting point. There's obviously enough there to be going on. These were the issues last summer. Let's have a look at what we can do in terms of getting more views on them. I'd say in terms of different times of year, I mean, this survey for the last 3 occasions has been in those months of June, July, and August. I think there is definitely a degree of if you did it in a different season, it might have a different outcome. But what's more prominent is, for example, 3 years ago, we'd at that stage been through 2 lockdowns of COVID. That had some impact on some of the messages, understandably. Similarly, we've been through very transitional few years again. Cost of living, for example, and other influences can make a big difference to some people's feeling and even confidence. And I think, as we said at the start this evening, just around that little bit of a decrease again in public services and the confidence in them. Again, lots of factors around that. So it's maybe not the time of year as such. It's almost wider influences and that can make it have a bigger impact. That said, I mean, we're looking at quite a lot of consistency from 3 years ago in a lot of the statistics. So it's not as if the things have changed wildly. In a lot of cases, there is that consistency there, but it's just, again, I think we need to get down to the granular level here to understand more exactly what we've tried to say, and hopefully the actions are on their way to doing that.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, obviously, I think a lot of interesting points have already been made. You mentioned, Ed, the peer review, which actually did, made the comment that perhaps communication, certainly with the elderly demographic, wasn't what it should be. And also ethnic minorities was mentioned. And I think, again, in terms of the survey, obviously, you'd have to have more in terms of information coming back from people when they feel to actually get that information. And without a doubt, surveys are notoriously under-responded to, without a doubt. But I think you also made a very good little diagram at the end about, we are sort of, it's a survey, perhaps it's a consultation, but unless we are doing the sort of engagement and involvement with residents on some level, then we're going to continue to get poor response, I think, to at once every 3-year consultation. Work has to be put in, and the point was made that what was it? And it was the same from the last survey. 26% of people who agreed that they could influence council decisions, and I think that says a lot. I mean, in terms of what you wanting people to feel that they do have some impact and their views can impact on council's services. So in order to get that, you've got to engage and interact with them more, I think, without a doubt. But then we come back to what you have continuously mentioned, funding. I think, was there at one point, or did I make that up, that there was a suggestion of some form of focus group, which I know also would have its difficulties, but, you know, I think the thing is it's every 3 years as well. And, you know, we either accept this is what it is, or we try and obviously improve on a residents actually being able to give their feedback and us taking some notice of it, really. Thank you.
Yes, some absolutely valid points there. Starting with the elderly, ethnic minorities, more hard to reach groups. This is where we've got to reach out more. Absolutely. So again, we'll look at ways in which we can do that with the resources we've got. I know I keep saying that, but it is looking at realistically what we can do. But it's not to say that it's not impossible. I think one example is we've got a Lunar New Year event, again, a week on ever-growing community in one of our towns, for example, where we need to engage more. And there are plans in terms of take that event, feedback from that. We're not just asking, we're actually going to use the groups that have got the connections, not just in English, but of course in Mandarin, to ask for the feedback. What did you think about the event? Is there anything else, any of the council services you need to know about? We need to use opportunities like that a lot more that we haven't used in the past. So that's definitely a big focus of it. I take on board your point in terms of obviously something around being able to influence decisions. This is something that was asked 3 years ago, and again, similarly had a lower score. I think there's ways in which, again, understandably, given the growth of the borough in recent years, I think you can understand that's only one example, but how that process is set by central government, and therefore, even as a borough council and as borough councillors, there is not always every single avenue to try and affect a decision. I know that's been well documented in terms of the growth of it. So you can understand really why some residents might feel frustrated that they can't influence things as much as they might. But I think that's another big area to understand. What is it they also feel they can't influence? Is it shaping a service? If they've got a particular view about an event, about curbside glass, about some element that they really feel passionate about, how can we try them to get them involved? The focus group came up 3 years ago at this meeting, and it was suggested that to explore it. And the feeling then from the community scrutiny group at the time was it wasn't really going to add that much more if we asked the same group of people the same ideas. So again, I would be open to anything that would assist with that. If there was a focus group, it's something to consider again. But given that we are at our fingertips, we've got the ability to reach out to a greater number of people digitally and through the means of the increased ways we're trying to look at this evening. I would probably still look to put the resource into that, but that's not to say a focus group isn't something else to consider.
I'm just thinking of the Christmas lights, which is obviously always in Bridgeford, and I mean, I obviously popped down there, but a number of parents obviously mentioned to me that it's so busy, it's so crowded that often their children, are actually not getting a lot from it and are quite sort of intimidated by the crowds and the thing and whatever. And yet, obviously, it is basically the main event that we do. And it certainly is something that we should continue to do. But some sort of feedback from, is really quite necessary. Because, I mean, in terms of myself being down there, I've often thought, oh, how can I get out?
That's ever more the focus. I know the events team looked at that very, very closely. I know the event that's just gone, the weather wasn't particularly good on the day. They had lesser crowd. It was easy, but people did comment about how it was easier to move around, for example. But they look at that in terms of, again, even it's only one barometer, but social media, I think I can only recall one negative comment about the event just gone. The rest was otherwise well received. And it's difficult, isn't it, in terms of, and that's not to say that should be your indicator alone of, well, everything's great. This is what we're trying to do here. that we would look to try and, after that event, have a dedicated, if you came to the event over the weekend, give us your views. And it isn't just on council channels, because we know not everybody follows us in those ways. It would be trying to get it out to a wider demographic using the press contacts and everybody else. Councillor Fretz mentioned earlier about, other stakeholders, trying to get that wider base as possible so you can get those views. So that's certainly something that we're going to consider.
I've got my list next. Councillor Mallender.
Thank you. Yes. Moving on a little bit to the one at the bottom there, the one that's obviously is a riveting interest to absolutely everyone. The local government reorganisation. So obviously this has come along since the survey's been done. But have we had many inquiries or much interest from anybody locally about that? Because we've all said this thing about people don't know which council it is. So would people be happier with a single council? But then people also want it to be a local council and responsive and therefore not far away. And then if you have a mayor or combined authority or whatever, you still have another tier because everything gets bumped up to another level. And inevitably, there's going to be disagreements over what kind of election system you use for this. Do we persist in being one of the few countries apart from Iran that still uses first-class posting, that kind of stuff. So have we had anything about that? What kind of feedback are we going to provide? How are we going to do it? And who's going to be making those decisions?
This is probably not the forum this evening to answer that, try and give you a complete answer. However, what I'd say is that having looked at what's already been on public forums, in the press over the last few weeks, it will lead towards the council leaders making a decision by the end of March. I understand that will then feed into wider public consultation come the autumn. That's very, very loose. I think it's anticipated is the word in all of that. There's nothing that's come through to our channels directly. There's been maybe one or two comments on social media, certainly nothing through on email. I think with respect to even residents are looking from afar at the moment and trying to understand what is going on in terms of what's the next step. And because there has been nothing set out in stone by any local authority, including RBC so far, there's not been any views on it. So no, we've had very, very little interaction on it. That isn't to say we've got, understandably, a very captive audience looking at what might take place. But no, there's been nothing so far.
Councillor Billing.
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking back at the point one about how you sort of audit channels, etc., and exploring further ways. You said you said that the survey followed a boosted campaign, so that was a boosted Facebook campaign.
Yeah.
Do you have a regular annual budget or program for boosted campaigns on Facebook? And kind of an adjunct to that, do you use the local newspapers? Because it's one thing receiving Rushcliffe reports, but people will actually browse through the local one. And if you have a quarter page in there saying, we'd like to know how we're doing, just click it. And the thing about feeding back that Councillor Clark said, perhaps something that can go out saying, you said, we acted. You tell us, we act. Even if it's just every couple of months, you've got a post bag full of this period, everyone wants to know this. Get something out there, to get engagement.
Yeah, we deal with Mark, who's the editor at it's the Nottingham Local News Group. I know they've got lots of different hyper-local versions, haven't they? And he's great, and we have some really good engagement and get news out there. It's a really, really key way of reaching people. What I would say is there's probably reasons why we haven't put, for example, the survey or pointed toward the survey in it, print deadlines, etc. We try and do this in a dedicated 5-6 week period to give that consistency with the benchmarking in previous years. But as we previously said, well, do we need to review this now? Do we actually need to be doing things and doing a dedicated survey with that outlet, for example, to give us a bit more of a bigger indication of, well, this, the demographic that read that particular newspaper, this is what they feel. So absolutely. And probably what we're suggesting here, so from the dedicated topical service surveys, we can do you told us X, Y, and Z. This is what we're going to do. So, if, for example, something like an event to say, well, Westminster Christmas light switch on, we need to, is a case that we can look at more space for families and individuals to enjoy that. What can we do? Subsequently, we can turn around and work with our events team to go, yeah, we can adjust it accordingly, so it makes it that little bit more spacious, or there's other elements, or we can expand the area in which we actually run the event. So yes, absolutely.
Major. I'm thinking of sort of wide around the whole borough. When it comes to grass cutting season, obviously that in the more rural areas, that can cause huge amount of inbox emails, particularly in East League. Something that goes out on social media or in Rushcliffe Report or local news just after it started, saying, "Are you happy with the way things are going? You know, are you happy with that question about open spaces?" If you were to run that during just at the beginning when things change from where it has been, I think you might get a bigger yield rather than going through the summer months when people are on holiday and gone away.
Yeah, I understand that. I think when we have this, not so much priority list, but a list of what we would want to look at consulting further on, we put a survey out quickly, get something out. We put a survey out quickly, get something actioned to understand it even further. So I think it's about being responsive as well.
I'm thinking rather than just being a survey that goes out, we need, rather than just a survey, put something out to a little bit of education. You know, this area is not being mown because the number of grumbles we get from people about scruffy verges when actually it's a wildflower area that hasn't flowered yet. You know, so just educating people why rather than just a survey. What do you think?
We probably struggle to some degree to do things on a particularly hyper-local level. For example, one small site in one area, but it could be that we do a generic message. There could be several sites like it across the borough, and therefore reasons around it. So yeah, no, again, that's something to consider, something more specific related on a particular service and time of year. Yeah.
Just going on the point that Councillor Billing said about education and that, and with some of the results from the survey, we'll be looking at picking out some of the areas and to kind of just do some engagement posts on social media, just to reiterate kind of what we actually do and how we monitor some of the things where there's been a change in perception and that, just to let kind of people know against our own kind of performance indicators. For instance, the percentage of people who are satisfied with street cleanliness has gone down 3%. But then where people have a factor and percentage of people that feel the following factors are a problem in their area, there's been an improvement with rubbish and litter flying around. So there's like two kind of indicate in the survey that then contradict and differ against each other. So is there something like just around that, for example, that could go out about how we monitor like street cleanliness and cleanliness around the borough, and what we actually do from a day-to-day point of view, and working with Streetwise, for example, and what they do, and our own internal kind of indicators and how we monitor how we're doing as well.
I think that absolutely, and we'd look to include that in the blurb of a survey to give that introduction and context. So before people respond, they try and understand it. I think going back to the previous point, with respect, people don't always read everything in front of them. They're very, very keen. They want to get passionate, get their view across, but we can make it as clear as possible.
Are we looking at like potentially then putting some of these things on our social media channel in video form, and that not necessarily somebody speaking, but in a video that then people will see, or audio as well, that you don't always get people who will sit and, like you say, read something, but they'll listen to a video or watch, like it was alluded to with TikTok, like a short video that you can put onto Instagram and Facebook, and that people can pick up. That's just a snippet, and it can make it very powerful for people's attention.
We know there's increasingly a way in which to deliver video in a really short, sharp way that can still get across. We want your views, but introduce the topic and try and get to the heart of what, some of the feedback we've had so far. So if we want to learn more about a topic, if there are residents that are unhappy with verges not being cleared properly or grass not being cut properly, we can still get a quick, sharp video. We understand the engagement does come a lot more from video, so we try and do as much of it as possible as time and resource allows.
Right, I've got my next, Councillor Perret.
Thank you, Chair. Point number 2, where it says to receive, replacing the triennial survey to receive more up-to-date data to shape services. My experience is if I go to an event or any function, the easiest way for me to give feedback is if I'm actually at that function, and before leaving, if somebody gets hold of me saying, can you please do this before you leave? And not able to move on to the next thing till I don't complete the survey. I mean, obviously, as a council, we can't physically tell people that you're not going to leave up until you don't complete the survey. But have we considered that when the event is actually happening, and I can probably say a Christmas light switch on or a lark in the park or anything that's going on, any other part of the council, have we considered using QR codes as well as the physical paper copy of the surveys, which Councillor Fletcher mentioned, old style, where we can have people coming and doing it there and then, because then it's not an additional chore. You're already there, because then if you send a survey later on, like, oh, I'll do it later or not now, and then you forget about it. But when you're actually there, you're in good spirits, and especially if you've enjoyed the event, you're more likely to do that. So that's something we should consider, especially QR codes, because youngsters all have their phones. So we've talked about tapping different age groups. I'm pretty sure that a lot of youngsters would not have responded to this survey. And the way to kind of gather their attention is to use more savvy things like social media as well as QR codes. And the other thing, what I was going to say, you showed the data about the percentage of increase or decrease in people's satisfaction about various aspects related to the council services. One of them which wasn't mentioned here was quite a 10% drop, which was about rubbish or litter lying around. Because the percentage of people who feel that the following factors are a problem in the area, and rubbish or litter has been down from 42% satisfaction to 32%. So there's something to suggest there that even though it was a very small demographic or a very small number, it's likely that there is a problem there. So something that we need to consider in terms of getting that feedback more often and from a wider area in the borough. Thank you.
Chair, I apologise for coming back to what I said earlier, but these numbers and these percentages really are not meaningful. If you do any kind of statistical analysis, that there is a percentage of statistical error. With the big opinion polls, that they claim it to be 2 or 3%. Well, that's not been proven one way or another. But unless we can get meaningful numbers to reply to these surveys, they are not achieving anything. And unless we can find some revolutionary way of actually engaging people, and I've got no suggestions myself as to what that may be, but unless we can do something which breaks us out of this relative apathy of our residents, unless we can do something, I really don't think that these figures tell us anything.
Just to go back to Councillor Perret's questions first. Yeah, I would think that's definitely something to explore around doing, as we already said. I think Councillor Fletcher said, following up on the high street after an event, etc., in person, also at the time. I think it's resourcing that we've just got to look at and how that's done, because it would need a more another role to do that, to add to an existing budget, I would imagine. But it's not to say it can't be done, and there couldn't be something weaved into somebody's responsibility on the day. The QR codes, I think, again, this is anecdotally, you have to forgive me, I can't tell when, it was tried on 1 or 2 occasions, and the response rate was relatively low. Who knows, maybe there was just not enough of those QR codes given out in terms of, a simple business card style, please give us your feedback on the event. I don't know if we're in an era of life admin being so high and there's so many opportunities. We want your feedback, we want your thoughts, that people are a little bit so used to being asked. It actually now is something that they choose to not do. But you're absolutely right, to be able to get even any insight around what was good, what you enjoyed about the event, what you didn't, and reaching out to those younger demographics is definitely key. Just on the rubbish or litter, sorry if it isn't clear in the report, that's actually gone down from 42% to 32%. So that's actually improved. So compared with 3 years ago, those that thought litter was a concern has actually gone down. But that's not to say it's still a figure at 32%. We would like it a lot lower. So that's a positive. But again, there's other ways in learning around. Well, what about litter hotspots? There's other ways, and there must be people in terms of they feel 1 in 3 people still feel no, it's an issue enough for me. So yeah, there's something to be done about it. And I take your point, Council, in terms of just looking at the bigger picture on this, of where this sits. We've said about it's roughly 1 to 2% of the population who access our services have responded. This is why I think we are advocating this evening to improve the volume of consultation, to build into the bigger picture around it. Yeah.
Have we got anything on our website to encourage comments from the public, good or bad? How effective is that?
We get comments all the time in terms of, I could probably say, our customer services mailbox, we would get dozens of emails a day that gives the feedback. Goes back to my point earlier to say we are listening every day.
Yeah. And
that they are genuinely shaping things. So the trends, they directly feed into service delivery. You just may not see it. So that, there's lots of ways in which, and customer services is just one of them. Even down to obviously complaints. There's
so if we analyse those, would we get a more meaningful picture than the actual survey results?
I think it's what you call definition of meaningful. I'd say it's another insight. People contacting us in a certain way, and obviously sometimes can have a perception about a service, or this has been my experience with the service. It's telling us one thing to say. In some cases, I'm not happy with the service. I expect better. Versus an exercise like this, which is different. So it depends on your definition of meaningful. I think in fairness, both give us insight that can help try and make things better ultimately.
Just to clarify what Ed said as well, because I think this just shows sometimes we get anomalies, because I picked up on the cleanliness one as well. So I've just gone back and had a look at it, Councillor Brett. When we asked people, are they satisfied with the cleanliness of the borough, in 2021 it was 67, it's dropped to 64. But then when we asked a sort of more direct question about what are the problems in your area, is litter a problem? In 2021, 42% of people were saying it, but as Ed says correctly, it's actually dropped by 10%. So whilst overall satisfaction is down, actually public perception of litter is not a big issue as it was 3 years ago. So it just shows some of the anomalies you can get in these surveys.
Thank you very much, councillors, for your views and comments for what we're being asked tonight. I think we'll close that on the discussion and that. Just going on our recommendations to discuss the results and identify any further actions should be taken as a result of the survey findings, and agree for the council to include relevant follow-up actions in its communications and engagement and customer access strategies 2025-2028 relating to the ways in which residents can contact, engage and feedback on services. I think hopefully we're all in agreement that we've met those requirements and those recommendations. Thank you very much. Right, I shall now just move on to the final item on tonight's agenda, which is the work programme. The next meeting and the final meeting in this cycle is on the 3rd of April 2025, and we've got 3 items at the moment scheduled on that meeting. Is the Carbon Management Action Plan Review, which you may recall happens yearly. Similar time last year that we looked at that, and the Nottinghamshire Local Nature Recovery Strategy, and then of course a review of the work programme. So that's what we've got for the 3rd of April. Can I have a show of hands to just accept that, please? Thank you very much. And on that, I don't think there's anything else on our agenda.